When we first started traveling full-time, we really didn't know how to pick Airbnbs for a long-term stay. So we had some hits and we had some misses. Well, mostly we just had a whole lot of misses.
We've stayed in some pretty nice Airbnbs and we just love showing them off in our videos. We always make sure to give you guys lots of those beauty shots of our apartments wherever we are in the world.
But the truth is that for every gorgeous Airbnb, we've also stayed in some total nightmares.
Absolute nightmares.
No Airbnb is ever perfect, and some of them were very far from perfect.
So to give you guys just one little example, we stayed in an Airbnb in Toronto that seemed okay from the photos. We could tell that the furniture was a little run down, but the location was great and the price was right. Well, we couldn't believe what we found when we got there. The kitchen was just crammed full of old food. Every shelf, even the fridge and the freezer had someone else's half-used food. Not to mention the bathroom. I mean, it took Gillian a day to clear it all out.
And that wasn't even the worst place we've stayed.
No, it was not. So we're going to take you through our top 5 worst Airbnbs. So these are the most awful places we've ever stayed in from our past 2 years of full-time travel.
But first, a big hello to all you nomads and adventurers from our latest destination. We're in Antalya on the coast of Turkey, and it's really chilly here this morning, but it sure is beautiful.
That's right. So we're traveling full-time, staying in Airbnbs as we go, and trying to bring a little more adventure into your life. When we first started traveling full-time, we were feeling pretty frugal. We just wrapped up a couple years of very intensive cost cutting. I mean, we moved into a studio apartment, we quit our expensive CrossFit gym, we started buying our food in bulk. I was even making a lot of my beauty products at home. So when we quit our jobs to go off and travel the world, we were feeling very price sensitive. We had a budget of $900 a month for our Airbnbs, and we were gonna try to make that work no matter where we were.
The only problem was that we had zero experience with picking Airbnbs for longer stays. Of course, we'd booked a lot of cute little Airbnbs in the past, but those were just for 1 or 2 nights. We had no idea how to pick an Airbnb for long-term use. When we're actually living in the place, we'd need to cook meals, spend the evenings there, do a little computer work. I mean, this is totally different from being a tourist. So as you can imagine, we ran into problems right away as soon as we got to one of our first destinations, Lviv, Ukraine.
To be honest, at the time, there weren't that many really nice Airbnbs to choose from in Lviv. So we picked one that seemed okay. And then when we arrived, we were introduced to what we've come to see as a very common feature in many Eastern European countries. So it was a very dilapidated building, lots of stairs, and no elevator.
So as soon as we got into the apartment, we realized that we hadn't looked at the photos as closely as we should have. If we had, we would have seen some really, really uncomfortable furniture.
Yeah, so there was a big vinyl couch. It was always very cold to sit on and very hard, not cozy at all.
I don't think I sat there at all.
No.
There were these little stools at the dining counter instead of proper chairs.
No backs.
I mean, really the only comfortable place to sit was the bed.
And even that wasn't actually so great. Of course, there were lots of other issues as well. So the walls were kind of like scuffed up and dirty. There was no cutting board. I was actually having to cut vegetables on a plate.
The oven didn't work.
The oven didn't work. And worst of all, there was no way to make coffee.
And that was supposed to be home for the next couple of weeks.
So we learned that it's really not enough just to look at the photos. You have to scrutinize them. You really have to understand all of the details and especially think about what it would be like to live in the space. So to this day, if I see a vinyl couch in an Airbnb photo, that's an instant pass.
So anyway, we went directly from that apartment to one that was much, much worse. It was our very first time in Istanbul, and we were sticking way too firmly to our budget of $900 US.
So even I was sticking to the budget back then.
So we didn't understand that in some destinations, even low-cost countries, nice apartments just cost more. So our first impression was terrible. So this building is pretty typical of the area. It's an older neighborhood, and you can see it needs a coat of paint. Fortunately, we're on the first floor this time, unlike the 6 flights we had to walk up in the beach. We arrived after dark, checked out the kitchen, opened the fridge, and discovered that the power had been off for quite some time.
There was a terrible smell coming from the fridge. It was just shocking. And we didn't even know how we were going to begin to deal with that.
So then we started to take in the rest of our surroundings. Now, this apartment had been described in the listing as bohemian. And that should have been our first clue that it was going to be a real hodgepodge of old mismatched furniture.
I call it kind of like a rummage sale style. Anyway, the whole place was just jam-packed full of furniture and somebody else's stuff. The kitchen shelves were full. It took Gillian a couple days to declutter enough of it so I would feel comfortable just to like step a little foot inside.
Sounds like a trend here. So I really regret not capturing all of this on video, but at that point, right at the beginning of our travels, we were trying to show the glamorous side of travel when it's really not always the case.
So great. We were a couple Airbnbs into our travels, and we were finally really learning the importance of scrutinizing those photos very closely, but we still had a couple more lessons to learn. So our next major stop was Florence, and this is not an inexpensive city. I mean, you try finding a nice apartment there for $900 USD a month.
So I can take the blame for this one. I found a place that seemed pretty charming and was surprisingly close to our budget. The only problem was that there was only one guest review, and that should have been a major red flag.
So in person, it really was a charming space. It was kind of your typical old-fashioned Florence apartment, like maybe a grandmother would live in. But there were just 100 small things wrong with it.
No garbage bin, no lids for the pots.
And this one really bothered me. There were only 2 mugs and they were mismatched and chipped.
Not enough cutlery.
That's right. The Wi-Fi wasn't working consistently.
Instead of a double bed like normal, there were 2 single-and-a-half beds. I mean, I didn't even know that a single-and-a-half bed size existed. It just wasn't big enough for the 2 of us.
So never mind the 4 of us if you include the 2 dogs. But basically, it wasn't set up well as an Airbnb, and certainly not for a long stay. So we realized that moving forward, we need an Airbnb with some history. So if a place is newly listed, maybe it has no reviews or even just a couple reviews, that's not for us. We want to know that other people have stayed there and all the kinks have been worked out.
So after that place, we did end up picking some really good ones. We had a gorgeous apartment in Athens.
Yes, we had a really nice place in Split, Croatia.
And we'll share all our absolute favorites with you guys in another video next week. But right after that, we hit our lowest point ever. This was the apartment that almost broke us.
Yeah, that's right. So we were back in Istanbul and really struggling to find a place that offered everything we wanted and had a good price.
So we finally found a place that looked really nice in the photos. It was done up in like a Scandinavian minimalist kind of style, actually really unusual for Istanbul. It was an Airbnb Plus property, and we did end up paying way over budget, expecting that it was going to be a really nice place.
We did have a few little concerns going in. So a couple of the reviews mentioned that the shower stall was mildewy and also that some of the furniture needed repair. And we actually did ask the host about the shower stall, and they said it was fine now.
Well, we were blown away when we arrived, and not in a good way. Sure, the shower had been scrubbed clean, but the rest of the place was just full of problems.
So the sofa was also a Murphy bed, which was broken. It couldn't be fully closed, so that meant it was actually hanging over us whenever we sat on the sofa.
But I mean, that was just the beginning. The upholstery and mattress were stained, the chair legs kept falling off, light bulbs were missing, there weren't enough plates or bowls, list just goes on.
And yes, over the course of the month, the shower stall did in fact become full of black mold because there was no ventilation.
So whenever I think of that apartment, I think of our worst moment as Airbnb guests. A team of 3 people came over to clean the upholstery, and we couldn't stay in the tiny apartment while this was happening.
But we had literally nowhere else to go because Istanbul was in a state of lockdown because of COVID.
So we just had to stand outside and wait. And since it was December, it was cold and it was rainy.
Worst apartment ever.
So you're probably wondering what we did about it. Well, we spent a lot of time documenting all the issues, and we shared everything with Airbnb and ended up getting a refund for our first week.
Which was great, except that we wasted a whole week of all of our time in Istanbul.
So we knew coming out of that experience that this lifestyle of ours, full-time travel, it just wasn't going to be sustainable if we were dealing with this sort of thing every time. So we came up with our criteria for screening Airbnbs and weeding out the duds.
So this is our checklist. You probably have your own. So first of all, Airbnbs with high ratings only. So we're talking a 4.8 out of 5, or ideally even higher.
So we also like to see at least 8 or 10 reviews. That means that a number of guests have tested out the apartment, and if there are any issues to be found, they found them and resolved them.
So we don't want to be the beta testers. We want somebody else to do that work. We also read every review in detail. So those guest reviews, they're the best source of information that we have about an apartment, and we have to pay very close attention to every little thing they say.
So if a couple of guests mention that the shower is mildewy, well, the shower is probably mildewy, and that's an apartment that we need to avoid.
And we're not just looking for reviews where the guest said, it was a nice place. We're looking for phrases like outstanding, or the host went over and above, or it was beyond my expectations. I mean, I really want to see some superlatives.
We also want to see well-lit photos showing every single room in detail. And if any important rooms are missing, like the bathroom, well, we'll just ask for more photos. And if you can see a lot of personal items in the photos, then the cupboards are likely to be full of stuff too.
And we've come to understand that sometimes you just need to pay a little bit more if that's what it takes to get a really nice place, no matter how much it pains Gillian. So over time, our monthly budget for accommodations increased from $900 US to $1,200, and now it's $1,500. And this is still very workable within our annual budget. We can always make up for it by going to lower cost destinations later.
So of course, that's just the beginning of our list of must-haves and non-negotiables. If you want the full details on what we look for in a great Airbnb, you can check out the next video right here.